Hi, everybody. My name is Erika Barker. I am a PhD student with Dr. Dominique Hopkins in the School of Kinesiology. And this is a presentation about the lived experiences and barriers to care among people with multiple sclerosis, a preliminary qualitative study. So some background of MS for those of you who might be unfamiliar. It is a chronic health condition that affects around 2.9 million people worldwide. The manifestations may include upper and lower limb impairment, as well as many other different systems in the body. So vision, your central nervous system, speech and swallowing, urinary and bowel, muscle control, sensation, all of those things. Research has historically focused on locomotion, but about 76% of people with MS were found to have some form of upper limb impairment. And so there's this gap in the literature that exists where we've done all this research on locomotion, but we don't really know the effects of MS on upper limb impairment and the effect that that has on people's lives. So the primary aim of this study was to understand the lived experiences of people with MS navigating changes in function across both upper and lower limbs. So this study was part of a larger mixed method study that was age and sex match for people who had MS and people who did not. This part of the study is the qualitative section, just focused on our participants who had MS. So you had to be an adult who could speak and write in English, who had a diagnosis of MS, and had no history of any other condition other than MS that impacted performance in upper extremity and balance, and also no relapses in the last 30 days. And then for our study procedure, for this part, we conducted semi-structured interviews with adults over Zoom. These interviews explored life experiences concerning hand function, balance, and seeking healthcare. And then our data were transcribed verbatim and de-identified. So some of the demographics and characteristics of our participants. Our average age was 54.7 years, so we were working with a little bit of an older population. The majority of our participants were female, and the majority of our participants were white. The most common MS type was also relapsing and remitting. And then our average age of how long people had MS was around 16.5 years. And then our EDSS scale, which is what we use to see how much impairment somebody experiences, particularly in relation to locomotion, was about a 3.6. So mild to moderate in terms of impairment with balance and walking. So for our data analysis, we use interpretive phenomenological analysis, or IPA, which looks at how our participants make meaning of their experiences. This analysis included deductive and inductive codes that were created iteratively. There were 4 of us who worked independently to code, and then we reconciled collectively. And after our preliminary analysis, we had 4 themes that popped up. The first one being the who, what, when, where, and why of navigating changes in hand function. The second one is the internal process of experiencing changes in function. The third one is ableism. And the fourth one is modifying my environment. So thinking about this first theme, which is the who, what, when, where, and why of navigating changes in hand function, this theme captures the breadth of knowledge and awareness and willingness to seek healthcare for experienced changes in hand function. And what we found is that our participants had a very wide range of answers as who they would see, what they would see them for, when they would seek out care, where they would go, and why they would seek out the care that they described. So there's not really consensus on what counts as severe enough impairment to go see a doctor. So some of the quotes that we have for this first one, this person was asked, at what point would you see that limitation with your hand function would be severe enough that you would seek out a professional for assistance? And this participant said, I don't know, that's a good question. Back when it was super severe, I would have asked somebody or tried to figure out somebody, but I've always thought like the mobility and everything would have come back, so I don't know. So this first person is really hammering down, there's not really a clear definition of when they would see someone and how. The second person was asked a similar question, at what point would a limitation be severe enough? And this person said, I think definitely if like shaking or numbness, if it started to impede where I could not grasp items and hold on to them, like I was dropping objects, that would definitely cause me to call a neurologist. So here we see who they would call and at what point they would call them. The second theme is the internal process of experiencing changes in function. So this really captures the range of experiences that our participants had when thinking about their changes in function internally. So this is sort of the emotional responses that they had, denial, acceptance, grief, loss, and resilience. And so some of our quotes, we have this first person who said, yes, and again, it goes back to, I don't want to look like I have MS, I just want to live my life. And the second person who says, I think there's an aspect of having a chronic illness that's kind of like going through the stages of grief. But the denial and the anger parts of it, I have friends or I have people in my life who do the why me thing. And to me, it's not like I'm being punished for it or something. If it's not me, it's not like I did anything to deserve it, but it's not like somebody else deserves it more. So it just is. And so my way of dealing with it is just to adapt and come up with solutions the best way I can. This third theme is ableism. And so the definition of ableism that we're going to be working with today is from the American Psychological Association, and it is defined as discrimination against individuals with disabilities or the tendency to be prejudiced against and to stereotype them negatively, as, for example, less intelligent, non-productive, or dependent on others. And so within this theme of ableism, we have these two sub-themes here. One is external ableism, which is ableism experienced from outside the person. So this could be somebody else coming and saying something to our participant. It could be a system that they have experienced. It could be a physical barrier. And then we also have internal ableism, which is ableism experienced from the self. So this is the internalization of these thoughts or stereotypes. So some of our quotes for external ableism, this first one is talking about how that's one of the problems is I'm always pushing myself to the limit because I don't want to not be a strong Black woman. So it's funny to me because they're like, you're not old enough to be handicapped. And I'm like, I didn't know it had an age limit. And the second one is, I mean, when I was diagnosed, I had the weirdest things. I had one person say to me, like, oh my God, I hope you don't lose your vision. And I was like, yeah, me too. Just said that out loud to me. It's like, I understand it's the fear, but yeah, it was quite amazing the things people would say. Or like, oh my God, I was hoping you were going to say anything but MS because my grandma had it and I never saw her walk a day of her life. And again, I was just like, okay, thank you. I don't know how to respond to that. And so these are the experiences of our participants of having other people come and say to them, oh my goodness, this is the worst thing in the world. And then we have our internal ableism. So this is a participant who was talking about how her son got them concert tickets, but they didn't get seat tickets. They bought lawn seats. And so he asked her, do you want to rent a chair? And she says, I don't want a chair. And he's like, I want you to take your cane. And I literally fought him the whole way to the event. Once we got in the parking lot and we parked in handicap parking because I knew, okay, that's a lot of walking and it's the summertime, it's hot, I know better. I know I'm going to need when I'm done. I know it's going to be hard and I'm glad that he made me. I had to use my cane and we had to wait for most of the people to leave. And so this is the influence of this internalized ableism on using assistive devices, which can really change somebody's outcomes. Thinking about this fourth theme, which is modifying my environment. So many of our participants describe their experiences of how they adapt the world around them or their lives to fit their changing levels of function. So one of the most common ones was asking others for help in certain scenarios. So this might be, asking somebody to cut their steak for them if they go to a restaurant, changing the doorknobs in their house to be handles instead of knobs, moving to a house with no stairs, or using assistive devices. And so one of the quotes that we have here is, oh, well, we had this home built in 2017 and it's all open space, so it's very user-friendly. They then list the drawers, the counter, the sink handles, everything was changed to be more user-friendly, easier for their hands to work. And so again, all of these drawers have handles instead of knobs. So thinking about how do we modify the environment around us to be more accessible. So from this preliminary study, we have some key findings. The first one is there's not currently a clear and known definition of when people experiencing hand impairment should see their doctor or what qualifies as impairment severe enough to seek healthcare intervention. This is a problem because if we want people to be proactive with seeking help, there's not a clear answer on, when should they see someone or who should they see or how should they see them. And so thinking about how can we change that so people have a fundamental knowledge of what counts as severe enough impairment. The second one is this process of experiencing change in function can be accompanied by many varied emotions. And so thinking about how do we support people who experience these things? Is this something that we could do with mental health therapy or some other sort of intervention to help people experience their change in identity? These last two are probably not going to be new to a lot of us who work in disability research, but ableism can impact lived experiences like the usage of assisted devices and feelings towards self. And also modification of the environment can contribute to better accessibility. Some of the future research ideas that I had originally from this is, what can be done to help support people get the help they want or need in relation to hand impairment? How can we support people navigating their internal changes with their MS journey over the lifespan? How do we combat the role ableism plays when seeking healthcare or using assisted devices? And how can we implement supports that will help people with their environment as it relates to changes in function over time? So these are our acknowledgements, and thank you to all of our participants. We could not do this work without you. And now I will take any questions.